Hi friends, welcome to the Wild Side. I'm Steve Hall. Sometimes things that are not supposed to happen just do. And sometimes things that are supposed to happen don't. For instance, there are not supposed to be coyotes anywhere in the eastern United States, but there are supposed to be red wolves. Instead, there are lots of coyotes all across the east, and red wolves are among the most endangered canids anywhere in the world. But at the foot of Lookout Mountain, there's an effort underway at Reflection Riding Arboretum and Nature Center to right what is wrong.
We're going this way!
A field trip is the colorful fabric that is woven into an exceptional education. But what these kids are here to see is something they should not be looking at through the woven wire of a wolf cage.
People don't even know that we have red wolves here or that we're supposed to have red wolves. So part of my job is just to educate people on why it's important and why we need them on the landscape.
Despite the zoo-like atmosphere and playfulness of these young wolves, they are wild. So keeping them in captivity is a last resort. But Reflection Riding is one of the 44 facilities across the country trying to reestablish a native animal that humans have almost destroyed.
When the settlers first came to the Americas, we had a ton of red wolves on the landscape. This is the only true wolf that lived in the United States. They are native to the Southeast. They are born and bred in the United States. The gray wolf migrated to the United States, and the Mexican wolf is native to Mexico. So when the settlers first came, they brought their stories of Little Red Riding Hood and all those fairy tales of how terrible and awful apex predators are, particularly the wolf. So they decimated the population.
No one even realized the red wolf was in trouble until the 1970s, and by then there were only 14 left capable of breeding.
Most people recognize that if you take the shark out of the ocean, it imbalances everything in the waters and you have too many of a certain fish. The same thing happens on the land. If you take the apex predator out, it causes a trophic cascade where then we have too many deer, and the deer overgraze certain trees and certain landscapes. Then we have too many raccoon, we have too many of a lot of things, and it can actually affect the landscape.
So coyotes are supposed to be all the way on the west coast, and we live on the east coast. But because their numbers, the red wolves' numbers, started to drop, there was a lot more food available. Coyotes do this kind of cool thing where they breed to how much food there is.
The red wolf is the top dog on the landscape. And if the red wolf makes a total comeback with a lot of numbers on the landscape, the coyote will leave the area.
Red wolves at Reflection Riding are part of a federal species survival program. So far, more than a dozen pups have been born here in Chattanooga.
The puppies usually stay with their parents for approximately a year, and then depending on the needs of the current captive population, they are sent to other facilities.
Every year, everybody that has red wolves meet and they decide which wolves are going where for the best genetic makeup. So like next year we might have a totally different set of wolves, or we might keep them. It just depends on how the program's working that year.
Daily care and feeding of wild wolves is done with extreme caution, and it is sometimes necessary to go into the enclosures. Training takes time, and building relationships often take years.
And so I will spend a lot of time getting them to get to know me really well, hoping that they will approach me like I was doing earlier, to help them feel more comfortable around me. And the ultimate goal for that is for me to be able to hand them medications individually. Animals know how to talk if we know how to listen. So their language is not verbal though, it's physical. Every movement you make, body posture that you do, even as simple as showing your teeth or not showing your teeth, all of that translates into a meaning.
There's a whole certain kind of way that we do interact with the wolves, but it is specific, and we do try to teach that to the kids is, yeah, they look really cute and they do look like your dogs at home, but they are wild animals, and that is where they're supposed to be, is in the forest.
The 317-acre property protected for the public back in the 1950s is dedicated to education and conservation, but there are also unlimited opportunities to explore all sorts of outdoor adventures.
So we got off the bus and we hiked up a mountain and explored and looked around at a lot of animals. She explained a lot to us about how birds of prey was and how they eat and protect themselves. A guy came to get them to come to the fence, and he kind of just called them you would kind of call a dog, basically.
And they were running toward him and trying to play, and they looked so like they were having so much fun, and they were just full of life. It was really neat to see that. Never gotten to see that before. That was special.
I think that's what I want to do maybe someday.
The work to rescue red wolves here at Reflection Riding is hopeful, but success is not going to happen easily and certainly not quickly. Efforts to replenish the population started nearly half a century ago, and their continued protection, whether they're living in captivity or in the wild, now rests on the shoulders of those who are just now learning about this native canine.
Kids are so valuable. We've got to educate these children. They are our next leaders, and they are our next conservationists. They have to understand the value of this animal and every animal, and why ecology is important, and why we have to conserve what we have. We have to take care of what's here. And if we can educate these kids, then they go and tell their friends, they go and tell their parents, and remembering too that the more we can teach them as they grow older, this is something that they value and something they recognize the value of, and then they become our leaders. And so hopefully they become conservationists and restorationists.
We are in a position now where we're going to have the environment that we choose to have in the future.
The plight of red wolves is now more about restoration and intense education if there's any hope for a wild release.
Make sure people don't hunt them and make sure they're safe so that we'll have a balanced earth.
The wolves are an apex predator, so that is a predator that puts everything else into balance. And I always say, we don't want to be doing this work. We don't want these wolves in captivity here. We want to get them back out on the landscape and reestablish them as an endemic native species that's just out there doing its part in the ecosystem. There's a debate about whether that's realistic. There's a debate about whether even fighting invasive plants is realistic, but this is the fight that we've chosen to fight, and we're out there to win it.
And with the next generation of leaders already learning about the plight of red wolves and coming to understand that they are native and belong on the land, the battle has begun. In Chattanooga, I'm Dakota Castile on The Wild Side.
Our website, wildsidetv.com, will lead you to more information about red wolves and the Reflection Riding Arboretum and Nature Center. North Carolina is the only place where there's a small population of red wolves living in the wild, and as you might imagine, it is very controversial.